Donnie Yen is often mentioned in the same breath as Bruce Lee, and not without reason. Few martial artists turned actors have ever combined real combat skill, cinematic intelligence, and cross-cultural appeal the way he has. Yet, despite working with some of the biggest franchises and directors in the world, his journey toward that status was anything but smooth. If anything, it was defined by long delays, bad timing, and repeated near misses that would have ended most careers long before they truly began. He was born in 1963 China into a life already shaped by martial arts. His mother, Bo Sim Mark, was an accomplished martial artist who would later found a kung fu school in Boston. From a very early age, Donnie was immersed in real training rather than movie choreography. When the family moved to the United States while he was still a child, his upbringing became split between two worlds. On one side was traditional Chinese martial discipline. On the other was Western pop culture, especially the explosion of Bruce Lee films, hip-hop, breakdancing, and bodybuilding. That mix of East and West would quietly shape everything that followed. Unlike many performers who only train enough to look convincing on camera, Donnie was pushed toward mastery. As a teenager, he returned to China to attend the Beijing Wushu Academy, one of the most demanding martial arts institutions in the world and the same elite school that produced Jet Li. This was not about fame or image. It was about refining technique, endurance, and discipline at a professional level. By his early 20s, Donnie had already lived and trained on both sides of the world multiple times, gaining a depth of experience that few of his peers could match. That background made him look, on paper, like the ideal successor to Bruce Lee. He had authentic martial ability, cultural fluency, and a physical presence that translated well on screen. Naturally, the Hong Kong film industry noticed. He caught the attention of legendary choreographer and director Yuan Wuping, who made a bold decision, casting Donnie not as a side fighter, but as a lead actor in the 1984 film Drunken Tai Chi. It was a major opportunity, especially for someone so young, but the film did not become a hit. The failure wasn't catastrophic, but it was damaging. In an industry that moved quickly and ruthlessly, a weak debut could quietly close doors. Rather than launching Donnie into stardom, it placed him in an uncomfortable middle ground. Clearly talented, but not proven as a box office draw. The follow-up only made things worse. In 1985, mismatched couples tried to combine kung fu with the breakdancing craze sweeping the West. The experiment felt dated almost instantly, and the film failed to connect with audiences. By the mid-1980 seconds, Donnie Yen already carried an unfortunate label. He was seen as someone who had been given a shot as a leading man and hadn't converted it into success. In Hong Kong cinema, that reputation could be hard to shake. What followed were several difficult years spent taking small film roles and television work, hustling just to remain visible while momentum slipped away. At the same time, the industry itself was evolving. Traditional kung fu films centered on masters and disciples were losing popularity. The late 1980 seconds ushered in a grittier style, influenced by guns, urban violence, and anti-hero storytelling. Filmmakers like John Woo were redefining action cinema, and stars like Chow Yun-fat were becoming icons of this new wave. Donnie tried to adapt with the 1988 film Tiger Cage, which offered faster, more aggressive choreography and less stylized wirework. While the film demonstrated his ability to handle harder-edged action, it still did not propel him into true stardom. As his career stalled, his peers surged ahead. Jackie Chan had already established himself internationally and would soon dominate Hollywood with Rush Hour. Jet Li, only months older than Donnie, was becoming the face of heroic martial arts cinema in Asia and preparing his own transition to the West. In comparison, Donnie Yen found himself falling further behind, despite possessing skills that matched or exceeded many of those around him. The turning point in perception came in 1992 with Once Upon a Time in China 2. Donnie was cast opposite Jet Li, not as the hero, but as the villain. The film was critically acclaimed and commercially successful, widely seen as one of the best martial arts films of the era. Their on-screen showdown changed how audiences viewed Donnie. Even in a villain's role, his intensity, speed, and presence stood out. For the first time, he was no longer just a promising martial artist. He was a credible screen force. That momentum carried into Iron Monkey in 1993, where Donnie's transformation felt complete. Gone was the awkward hybridity of early roles. In its place was a controlled, powerful, on-screen warrior rooted in traditional kung fu cinema. Although the film wasn't massive on release, it would later gain global recognition and cement Donnie Yen's reputation among martial arts fans worldwide. But even then, the most frustrating truth remained. Despite flashes of brilliance and growing respect, Donnie Yen still could not claim a single financially successful film as a leading man. Far from becoming the next Bruce Lee, his career looked increasingly like the story of unrealized promise. For many actors, this would have been the end of the road. By the mid-1990s, Donnie Yen's career had entered its most uncomfortable phase. He was respected by filmmakers, feared by co-stars for his speed and precision, and admired by martial artists who understood just how real his skill set was. Yet none of that translated into box office authority. He continued to work steadily, but often in projects that reinforced a troubling pattern. Strong performances in films that did not perform well enough to elevate him beyond niche recognition. He demonstrated range in Wing Chun alongside Michelle Yeoh, a film that leaned more toward romance and character than spectacle. It showed that Donnie could handle lighter tones, humor, and emotional restraint rather than relying solely on physicality. Still, the movie failed to shift his commercial standing. He followed that with smaller appearances such as The Saint of Gamblers, briefly stepping into comedy once again. These roles proved versatility, but versatility alone did not build a leading career in an industry driven by hits. As the decade closed, the contrast between Donnie and the martial arts stars he was constantly compared to became impossible to ignore. Bruce Lee's influence had been immediate and explosive. Jackie Chan had cracked the formula of comedy and action and was now conquering Hollywood. Jet Li, whose path frequently intersected with Donnie's, had already become a national hero in China and was on the verge of major American exposure. Donnie Yen, by contrast, was nearing 40 without a single major commercial success as the lead. The idea that he was destined to be the next Bruce Lee began to feel unrealistic, even unfair. Faced with this reality, Donnie made a subtle but important shift. Rather than forcing lead roles in weak projects, he began accepting supporting parts in stronger films. In 2000, this strategy brought him to Hollywood for the first time in Highlander Endgame. The role was small, and the film itself underperformed, but it marked his formal entry into the Western industry. For Donnie, it was not about instant recognition. It was about learning how Hollywood framed action, character, and screen presence. That exposure led to Blade 2, where director Guillermo del Toro famously praised Donnie as a martial artist who understood how to perform for the camera. This comment carried weight. It acknowledged that Donnie wasn't simply a fighter placed in front of a lens, but a performer who understood framing, rhythm, and narrative movement. Still, he remained in the background while others took center stage. He returned to Asia to play a supporting role in Hero, one of the most visually celebrated martial arts films ever made. The film became a global hit and earned international awards recognition. Once again, Donnie was part of a landmark cinematic moment, yet once again, he was not the face of it. The irony was becoming cruel. He was contributing to genre-defining works without receiving genre-defining status. Even roles like his villain turn in Shanghai Nights followed the same pattern. The films were bigger, the exposure wider, but the spotlight never fully landed on him. At an age when most action stars either peak or fade, Donnie Yen was still searching for his true breakthrough. The industry no longer doubted his ability. The real question was whether audiences would ever accept him as a lead worth building a franchise around. That answer finally arrived in 2005 with SPL Sha Po Lang. This film quietly changed everything. Donnie not only starred in it, but choreographed the fight sequences himself, blending traditional kung fu with elements of mixed martial arts long before such realism became common in mainstream action cinema. Elbows, clinches, grappling, and ground fighting replaced exaggerated wire work. The violence felt faster, harder, and more personal. More importantly, Donnie's performance was restrained rather than showy. He played the lead as a man weighed down by fate, delivering explosive physicality only when necessary. For the first time, his acting and martial skills merged seamlessly. Critics and audiences took notice. This was not an imitation of Bruce Lee, nor an echo of Jackie Chan. It was something modern, grounded, and evolved. Flashpoint followed in 2007, building on the same realism and pushing it further. The now legendary fight scenes demonstrated just how influential Donnie's approach had become. Younger filmmakers and choreographers would later adopt this style, proving that he wasn't just participating in the genre, he was shaping it. Yet, even with this success, the defining moment of his career was still ahead. In 2008, Ip Man was released, and everything changed at once. Donnie was cast as Ip Man, the real-life Wing Chun master and teacher of Bruce Lee. The role demanded calm authority, moral strength, and emotional restraint rather than flashiness. Donnie delivered exactly that. His portrayal transformed Ip Man into both a cinematic legend and a symbol of Chinese cultural dignity. The film became a massive success across Asia and beyond. Unlike his earlier work, it connected with audiences on an emotional and historical level. For Donnie Yen, it was not just a hit, it was validation after decades of struggle. Ironically, the role that finally placed him alongside Bruce Lee was not that of a successor, but that of the man who trained him. Ip Man did more than rescue Donnie Yen's career. It permanently changed how he was viewed worldwide. After decades of instability, he had finally become the central pillar of a franchise that audiences trusted. The sequels that followed were commercially successful and, unusually, maintained quality as they progressed. Donnie's performance grew more layered with each entry, emphasizing restraint, dignity, and moral resolve over spectacle. This was no accident. By this point in his career, he understood that his strength was not in mimicking Bruce Lee's explosive charisma, but in offering a quieter, deeper authority shaped by experience. While the Ip Man series anchored him in Asia, Hollywood began to approach him differently. He was no longer treated as a replaceable martial artist, but as a performer with global credibility. That shift was clear in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Donnie played Chirrut Imwe, a blind monk warrior whose faith and discipline made him one of the film's most memorable characters. Crucially, this performance was not dictated entirely by the script. Donnie actively shaped the role, proposing character traits, humor, and even the blindness itself to avoid a one-dimensional portrayal. The result was a supporting character who often overshadowed the leads. Around the same time, he demonstrated something equally important: selectivity. Donnie turned down major roles in projects like The Expendables 2, Aquaman, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny, when he felt they reduced Asian characters to shallow action cliches. This refusal marked a turning point. Earlier in his career, he had taken whatever work was available simply to survive. Now, he was protecting his identity and his legacy. That level of control is something Bruce Lee himself fought for decades earlier, often clashing with Hollywood studios over representation and depth. His next major Western milestone came with John Wick, Chapter 4. Playing Kane, Donnie once again redefined what could have been a standard supporting role. The character carried warmth, internal conflict, and lethal efficiency without exaggeration. Physically, the action was grounded and precise. Emotionally, it conveyed exhaustion, loyalty, and inevitability. Reports of a standalone spin-off centered entirely on Kane only reinforced how much impact his performance had. Once again, Donnie proved that he did not need to headline a film to dominate it. Looking back, the question of whether Donnie Yen was destined to be the next Bruce Lee requires a careful answer. In raw potential, the comparison was always justified. He possessed elite martial skill, cultural range, and the ability to innovate action cinema. However, his path was fundamentally different. Bruce Lee became a legend in a matter of years, his career explosive and tragically short. Donnie's rise was slow, painful, and marked by decades of rejection, adaptation, and perseverance. Rather than replacing Bruce Lee, Donnie Yen extended his legacy. He carried martial arts cinema into the modern era, blending authenticity with realism, tradition with innovation. Where Bruce Lee shattered the old mold, Donnie refined and rebuilt it for a new generation. His influence can now be seen across contemporary action films, fight choreography, and performance standards worldwide. At over 60 years old, Donnie Yen remains in peak physical condition and continues to command attention in every project he joins. His career stands alongside figures like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and Michelle Yeoh. Not beneath them. If Bruce Lee showed the world what martial arts cinema could become, Donnie Yen proved that greatness does not have to arrive instantly. Sometimes, it is earned slowly, through failure, discipline, and the refusal to quit long after others would have given up. He may never have been the next Bruce Lee in the way the industry once imagined. Instead, he became something arguably more enduring. Proof that legends do not have to be born overnight, they can be forged over a lifetime.